I'd like you to think about the last time you felt fear. What were the circumstances? There was a survey done of high school students asking them what they feared the most. The girls said they feared getting raped or killed. The boys, being laughed at. Women's bodies are routinely objectified, scrutinized, and subjected to symbolic, institutional, and physical violence. Although there are a myriad of ways in which women's bodies are threatened, the most terrible of these is sexual assault. We know that women are most likely to be sexually assaulted between the ages of 16 and 24, the age of which is college students whom I teach. We know that sexual assault is a highly gendered crime. Of the victims of sexual assault, 91% are women and 9% are men. Of the people doing the assaults, we know that 98% of rapes against women were committed by men. Of the rapes committed against men, 93% were committed by other men, and most of these men are heterosexually identified. In terms of the actual numbers of how many people have experienced sexual assault, it is highly unreported. It's one of the most unreported crimes that we have. For example, college students, we know that 80% is underreported. 80% do not report their sexual assaults. We know that some certain groups, sexual minorities in particular, have even higher rates of underreporting, and part of that is compounded by homophobia in our society. Although we may not have the exact numbers and the numbers may be contested, we do know that this is a major problem. And for example, in my own life, more than 100 women and 1 man has disclosed to me their sexual violence stories. Now, I am a college professor. I am not a rape crisis counselor or volunteer. I am not a nurse. There is not a semester that goes by that at least 2 of my female students disclose to me their sexual violence stories. We are all implicated in this issue. And when I talk about being implicated, I mean that even though men commit the vast majority of the violence, women believe just as strongly in support of violence in the homes and in the government. Sometimes when we talk about male violence, it's assumed that women are not violent or that they condone violence. This is not true. Women are violent and women support violence, especially violence against other women. So, being implicated means we're all involved. So last semester in September at my campus, there was a group of young men in a fraternity at an off-campus event, and they had this slogan at their party. When I heard about this, I knew I had to act. This rape-promoting slogan, which also is fear-inducing, I think crystallizes some of the issues that we're facing right now. I should let you know that this slogan has been used across universities. This was not the first time we saw it. But I think it tells us a lot. First of all, the first part, it maps on, well, both parts, maps on to the tropes of masculinity being dominant. It also dismisses women's sexual agency. And it's interesting that such a slogan is happening at this time when we know more and more women are claiming their sexual agency and saying both yes and no to sex and under what conditions. But the second part of this slogan, yes means anal, reminds women that the male dominance is still here. It's presumed this will not be pleasurable. And even if you say you want to have sex, it's going to be on his terms. So this slogan raised a lot of issues for me. One of my first questions was, how can our students be so lacking in empathy? And my other question was, the women that stayed at the party, did they not realize that their inaction tacitly supports violence against women? Now, many scholars argue that right now we're living in a time that's characterized by post-feminist, neoliberal rhetoric. And what this means is that people are convinced that equality has already been achieved. This is an illusion of equality. The idea is that our social and political goals of equality have met, and we now live in a society where everyone is equal. So if you follow that line of thought, a joke, which is what the young men said that this was, might be, you could see how that might be considered a joke if you do not realize the extent to which the idea is that if everything is equal, then any indicator of sexism is a relic of the past, right? This is a relic of the past, and that it's meant to be a joke. Or if it's not meant to be a joke or parody, you should at least know that the women are freely choosing their choices. So we galvanized on my campus, and we took this as a massive teaching opportunity. Two of my close colleagues, Dr. Corby Kelly and Dr. Don Levine and we immediately strategized. We wrote a letter to our school newspaper. We asked other faculty members to sign it. We wanted every single person who had ever experienced sexual assault or the threat of sexual assault to know that we will not tolerate discursive violence on our campus. We wanted every student to know that we cared, that we were mobilizing, and that our institution of higher education would not be a place where students walk around in fear. So we did a lot of things. And we were amazed at the number of faculty that came out and the number of students that came out that wanted to do something about this incident. Just some of the examples that we did, we worked with the Dean of Students and we gave feedback on our website. We also gave feedback on policies at our universities. Several of the faculty went around and did trainings throughout campus. One of our artist professors made our slogan that we put on our office doors. Another professors made this one. And we had a letter writing campaign in our college newspaper where multiple faculty members wrote letters each week. I now use those letters in my college classroom and have people reflect on this. Now, what we were doing is interesting. We added to what was already done on our campus. We had already had a movement. All of these things had happened in the spring of 2014, and we had already had some of these discussions, because anytime you get professors involved in a movement, you're going to get lots of discussions and lots of trying to understand some root problems. So our momentum on campus is part of a wider momentum going on. It's a force that two young women, college sexual assault survivors, started because they experienced systematic injustice, and they exposed the widespread problems of college universities turning the other way. So let me put this into context. The force and the momentum we're feeling now, and we're watching people, including journalists, the government, the NFL, popular culture, we are watching people move from an individual analysis to a cultural analysis, to a more systematic analysis. Prior to this, our previous sexual assault program across universities, but when I first got here to my university, it was all about what the victim could do, or what women could do not to become victims. We were told, don't walk alone, don't leave your drink alone, don't drink too much, and be hypervigilant of your environment. Like most women in this culture, I have been hypervigilant of my environment since I was a little girl. I cannot remember a time when I wasn't aware and thought about danger in public space, especially at nighttime. Some scholars call this the geography of women's fear. What we have is that lots of women feel scared in public spaces, so much so that they restrict their use of public space. The irony, or the paradox, is that women are way more likely to be hurt in public space than private space, but they're more scared in their public space. So, programs that are putting the onus on women, right? Don't walk alone, lock your door, reinforces sort of this stranger danger, and reinforces that somehow your environment is not safe. And we already know that. We've known that since we were little girls. It also cultivates victim blaming. It also is not effective. The rates of sexual assault on college campuses are about the same as they've been since the 70s. And right now, I think these kind of messages are especially problematic since we are living through this neoliberal discourse whereby people are thought to be autonomous beings and accountable only to themselves. So it is implied that then if you got raped, there was something you didn't do right. Your choices made this happen. And we know that survivors scrutinize themselves, terrorize themselves, blame themselves. This is one of the most common reactions. We also know that victims are not likely to be believed. Friends, family members, and that is one of the worst things you could ever do, is not to believe a survivor. A survivor is better off not telling anyone than to tell someone who doesn't believe them. It adds to the trauma above and beyond the actual violence that was already done to them. And so we see this in our larger system, adding to the violence already done to women, our justice system, and then in the university systems. And so if we look at what was happening in our culture, of 100 rapes that were reported, 3 perpetrators will go to jail. We have hundreds of thousands of rape kits that have not been processed. We know that 90% of the rapes on college campuses are committed by the same men. It's about 5 to 6% of the college male population, and they are serial rapists. They commit about an average of 6 rapes. And these men are largely go free. They often will never have any consequences. So we are moving away, right? We're now looking at society. We're stopping, hopefully, putting the onus on women and victims. And we're moving to critiquing these larger systems. And what happens, even among the college men, what we know, even if they've confessed, people are still very sympathetic to them and worried about them. So we need to critique. This is a complicated problem. We have a class system at work, a gendered system at work, our notions of masculinity and femininity. We have a sexual double standard going on. But with all of those complications, there is one issue that is clear. The potential for abuse is very high if we live in a society that values men as a group more than women as a group. This would be called a male-identified society. And in my class, to substantiate my claim, I do a little exercise. And I'd like to do that with you today. If you could close your eyes, I'm just going to read a short reading, and then I'll let you open your eyes. It's called Women, which includes man, of course. Let us reverse the generic term man. Instead of man, we have women. Think of the future of women, which of course includes both women and men. One small step for women, one giant leap for womankind. It's the 5-year mission to boldly go where no woman has gone before. Since the meaning of this to you, the term woman, how do you feel as a woman, as a man? Think of the world in which woman has always meant women and men. It has been this way every day of your life. Feel the ever-presence of women and feel the importance of and feel the presence of man. Feel the importance of being a woman, feel the importance of being a man. Recall that everything you have ever read all your life uses only female pronouns. She, her, meaning both girls and boys, both women and men. Recall that most of the voices on the radio and most of the faces on TV are women's, on commercials and on late-night talk shows, where important events are covered. Recall that you have no male senator representing you in Texas. Feel the fact that the women are the leaders, the power centers, and the prime movers. You may now open your eyes. When I do this with my students, I ask the women students, how do you feel? And they feel important, they feel empowered. Sometimes they feel superior, but they definitely feel valued. And then they get upset because they feel sorry for the men in this story. And then they realize nobody feels sorry for them. The men feel devalued, not as important, and very uncomfortable. This is just one example of the male-identified society. If we look at our top positions in government, religion, business, they still are dominated by men. Even if we look at the issue of Black Lives Matter, the media has done a great job of covering the police brutality of young black men and boys. but they have overlooked the black women who have also been killed at the hands of police in the last couple years and for a while. I mean, we're just now moving to more awareness. So this idea, if you live in a male-centered society, then the attention and the language, it's not a surprise. People tend to feel more concern for somebody who's accused than to the women who have been assaulted. One of the biggest fears we have is disrupting this gendered system, right? Pushing men outside of the center. I am not pushing, the exercise was not to suggest that we need a woman-centered world, but it was an exercise in seeing how insidious it is that our daily lives, we put men in the center. We have other examples, the Oscars, only a handful of the Oscar-winning movies, only a handful have ever featured women's stories. So I am encouraged, despite all this I just said, I am encouraged because we are moving to disrupting this gender system. We are moving to looking at the culture and the ways in which all of us are implicated. We are doing it. I've been talking about these things for more than 10 years in my college classroom, and I have never been more encouraged. So I urge you, because you are implicated too, to join me in forging a fearless culture and think about and imagine what a fearless world would look like.